Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Friday's Coach's Corner. For those of you who are new to our group, I want to say a great big welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Penny Haldsome. I'm a holistic health and mindset coach. And together with Coach Lisa Balston, we host this group. Plus, we're co-owners in our Lux Life Coaching, where we help people move through their trauma, move through all of the things that hold them emotionally stuck, and to help them with their fitness and nutrition and movement goals. So today I wanted to talk about, I got a title, I've even got a graphic tee. You guys know I love my graphic tees. It's like I do yoga to burn off the crazy, which is true. It really helped. So today what we want to talk about, what I want to talk about is something that I talk about quite a bit. And it's about your trauma, and it's about how this affects our bodies, how it affects our mind, and how it shows up inside of our lives. Because we get this all the time, and I get this constantly from people. It's like, I don't have any trauma. I'm good. I'm fine. Nothing is wrong with me. You're right. Nothing is wrong with you. We're all perfect. We are all who we are supposed to be at this moment in time. So when we look at that, and I say that because I truly mean it, but what we also want to look at is how we advance through our lives, and are we really, in fact, living our life, or are we existing in our life? And this is a really key point, and everybody will say the same thing. Oh, I'm living my life. I'm doing all the things. But here's the thing. Are you really enjoying it, or are you going to events and then numbing out from it? Are you doing a job that you love? Are you finding your life is overwhelming? Do you have to take a vacation from your life? And then you're so exhausted on your vacation, you come back and need time off because you're so tired from your vacation. That's not living your life. That's existing in our life. These are programs that we've got in our head that everybody in society is like, oh, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. That's not true, right? So this is one of the biggest fallacies that we have is, well, everybody's running around being super busy. Everybody's doing it. It must be true. That's not also true, right? Like, it's also not the way we want to be. We want to have a life where we are filled with gratitude, where we can enjoy the downtime and, just learn to sit back. And I don't know for you guys, like, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm, 56, and I grew up with the whole, if you're not busy, I'll find you something to do. So you always had to stay busy. So your parents were always looking for things for you to do to keep you out of trouble. It didn't work, by the way, because, I don't know, for all my other Gen Xers out there, thank God there just was no internet to film all the stupid things that we did, because we did a bunch of stupid things. But what that does is it creates that momentum from childhood of, I must be busy, I must be busy. But what's happening is you're now an adult, and it's like so programmed into our subconscious that we must be busy that we take absolutely no downtime to legit stop and watch the clouds go by. Right? Do you remember that? Like, going to the schoolyard and just flopping down on the grass and staring up at the clouds and seeing all of the things and all the different shapes and animals and what have you, because you could lay there for a couple hours and just watch the clouds go by. So, I have a couple of recollections of that, but majority of the time, my childhood, I was always busy. If I wasn't in ballet or figure skating or jazz or chores or schoolwork or whatever, it was always something. So the idea of being quiet and the idea of stopping long enough to acknowledge what traumas that I had and what things I had to work through was very difficult for me. So if you're of that same mindset of having to understand that, oh my God, don't stop. Like, you can't stop. I'm just checking my notes. So this is where we get into this, constant movement, must have the busy badge, right? For those of you watching now or watching the replay, how many times have you like, understand that you're trying to watch, like trying to do everything. It's like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I can't do it. Because you've taken your life and filled it to the absolute max because you're avoiding what you know deep down that you probably should be looking at, right? So we get this a lot with clients. And I want to talk about how trauma shows up in our addictions, how those addictions show up in our life, and then how we can move past those. So that's what I want to talk about today. So if you have any questions or comments, guys, you can always put them in the feed, and I'll either see them here or hopefully see them on my phone and be able to answer you. If not, I will come back and answer after the live has gone up. So one of the things I want to ask you guys, if you're watching, especially if you're watching the replay, put hashtag replay in here. And do you feel you have an addiction? I always love this question because everybody's like, no, I'm totally fine. Totally fine. Okay, so let's look at when we talk about trauma. I want to explain what that is because everybody, as soon as I say the word, people like glaze over and they're like, I don't have any, so I'm going to stop listening. So I just want you to talk on the listening ears for a second and understand that trauma does not need to be a big T trauma where it's a life altering event. Okay. Small T traumas, I talk about this all the time, and I know Coach Lisa brings it up sometimes when she's talking about her stuff and nutrition and all her training and coaching, is like, it's like death of 1,000 cuts. Okay, so it can be things that have happened in your childhood that were so minute in the moment, but left an impactful motion for you as a kid. Right? So if you're like 3, 4, 5 and you're feeling neglected, avoided, it could be as simple as I went to the park, I was on the swing, I fell off the swing, and my mom was like, oh, you're fine, walk it off. Because like growing up, that was our parents. Like you did death-defying acts and they're like, oh, I think I died. Throw some dirt on it. You're good to go. Move, keep going. Right? So there was no cuddles. There's no, time out. There's no, let's stop and, make sure everything's good and process the emotions. So this is what I talk about is like all of these things get pushed down and bottled up and then they sink and you keep pushing them down until your body responds. Okay. So this is what happens when, you move from a trauma to an addictive state. So the addictive state that we're looking at can be anything from the coffee that you have in the morning. If you wake up and you say, oh, I need a coffee, that's an addiction. Okay, walk around the day, I need a coffee. I do it. I mean, there's days where I walk around like, oh my God, totally need a coffee. But I don't need it every day. I enjoy it. I can go without it. I have gone without it. It doesn't make or break my life. Does my brain kick on a little quicker? Sure. It's coffee, right? But let's be clear about if you're one of those people who are like, avoid everything because you have to have it first, that's an addiction. Okay? Same with smoking, shopping, the debt that we carry. Alcohol, obviously, sex, I talk about that one. Illegal or prescription drugs. If you're in that mode of I need this, right? Something you do every day or close to every single day. Gambling, the internet. If you're like what I call like, you're on here and you're like just the doom scroll and you get in there and then you realize, oh my God, like an hour has passed. That's an addiction to your technology, right? If you're on Netflix and you're binging for 8 hours, been there, done that myself personally, especially with Bridgerton. Can't help it. I can help it. Right? But I recognize the fact that I'm doing it. That's it. Like, right? So we have people that don't sleep because they come home and it's like they turn on the television and they're so like, we're going to talk about that functional freeze mode issue. And then they just like zone out. And then you ask them, what did they watch? I'm like, I don't know, everything. Right? Video games, food, work. Also, and we talk about being a workaholic. It's an actual addiction of avoidance because we want to not stop and look at who we are, what we're doing, or what's happening. We're avoiding everything by the addiction. So work is actually classified as one. So what does it classify as an addiction? When it becomes something that's harmful to yourself. Okay, so people know, people do this. We have women in this group all the time and they're asking questions and they're like, you know, like I have mid like belly fat and how do I lose my hormones, and they blame the hormones. Sometimes it's really about your coffee addiction first thing in the morning and the fact that you're refusing to make a change that becomes harmful to your health. So, you know, Coach Lisa talks about this all the time. You can still have your coffee, just don't have it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, right? So, and if it becomes harmful to your health that you want to avoid looking at, that's your actions, that becomes an addiction that is harmful to yourself, which creates a trauma in your body. Okay, so they all play into one into the other. So we also have to look at also the emotions that are attached to all of these things. Okay, so everybody's like, I don't have an addiction. I had many, by the way, many of them. And it was like systematically working through them and getting to a point of acknowledging them. And that's the first thing you want to look at is, are you acknowledging that you have these? So the emotions that we want to look at is like people have depression. And if they have depression, they have anxiety because they go hand in hand, right? Which comes from stress. It comes from like you're constantly thinking that you're in stress because we talk ourselves into this. And I've talked about this and in other aspects of like the stories that we tell ourselves. I'll get to that in a minute. So the other emotions that we look at are shame, feeling hopelessness, guilt, low self-esteem, the numbing, the fear, anger. Like these are all low vibrational emotions. And there's nothing wrong with the emotions. It's the fact if we live in the low vibration that brings down who we are. Like it brings our emotional awareness and our energy down. So there's always a spot at the table for all emotions in a given situation. But if you're always living in that same depressive, low energy emotions, then you have to understand and realize I need to make a change. Something's not working right. Okay, so this is where we have to look at. So then we look at moving from that to the people, like either yourself or the people in your life and how they support that. Now, nobody's going to love this comment. But for most people, they are their own enabler because we all have the funds to do it. Like, you know, if I have an addiction to chocolate, food, junk food, whatever, it doesn't matter. I've got the money to just like go and buy it whenever I want to, and I can hide it in my car, and I can eat it in the closet or the pantry, and nobody has to know, right? So if you're like, you know, a binge eater or an overeater or whatever the case may be, right? Like we have to look at shining a light on that and removing the shame from it. Because that, if we have shame, we have blame. And if we have blame, we're blaming ourselves. And then we're not taking any responsibility. And Coach Lisa and I talk about this in our videos all the time. The one thing as adults we have to do to make a change is acknowledge that we have to take responsibility and accountability for our own actions. We are not children anymore. Over the age of 12, that's where we start to like really go, okay, I have to take responsibility. Over the age of 22, take accountability for what we're doing. So that really becomes that question of like, are you your own enabler in the addictions that you have? Okay, so that's one thing. Or you're trying to, you know, here it goes. It's going to be a rough one, guys. So I'm just going to like give you this pause for a sec. Being your own victim. Okay, so this is very different than something has happened to you. You're a victim in the moment. And then we are living in victimhood where we continually cry like, oh, this. Okay, so we all have our stories. We all have had things happen to us. But if we live there and we allow ourselves to, you know, to sit there and go, oh, but this happened to me like 20 years ago. So now this is why I smoke, or this is why I drink coffee, or this is why I shop. This is why I do what I do. You're living in your own victimhood. And that's a rough one to say. I get it. But when you really start to take a look at taking accountability and the responsibility for your actions, it helps you release the shame and it releases the fear, and it releases what you're and the guilt and all the other things that you're feeling, so that you can actually then move forward. And we're going to talk about how that looks moving forward and moving through these things. So when we look at the emotions that we have, where do they come from in our youth? Right, where we usually have impactful things that happen under the age of 5, or impactful things that happen from like 11 to 13, preteen, like mid-teens, early 20s. These are times where we're growing and trying to learn who we are. And if you've already had 1 or 2 traumas here, it's like compound interest, right? Like they sit and they stay, and then you add on, and then those little traumas become big, right? Because now all of a sudden it's not that last thing that really did it, it's all the stuff that led up to it. And because you've never had an outlet for it, and you've never had the support, or you've never had somebody who just sat and listened and gave you space, right? So this is like, it's, for those of you who follow me on my personal page, you know that on Wednesday was the 14th anniversary of my son passing. And my friends know I don't need to talk about it ad nauseum. All I need is a safe space to just be. I don't talk about it much, not anymore, because I don't need to. My friends are like, I'm here, that's it. Like, there's no expectation of a phone call, a text back. It's holding space. And I use this as an example because I know it's a lot, but it's even if like you had a fight with your husband, and you go to your best friend and you're just like, I just need to be here and just like vent it out. There is no requirement for more words. It's just the feeling of support. Okay, so and if you've grown up not having that, that's where that's going to lead into, as adults, how our trauma manifests itself into the way we feel, our body's responses, our like why we do or don't do anything. Like procrastination is a huge thing. The functional freeze I mentioned earlier, we will talk about that. So this comes from growing up having fear, confusion, instability, abuse, neglect, sudden loss, feeling helpless, being bullied. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in an age where it's like boys could pull your hair and kick you down, like, oh, that's because he likes you. Bullshit. No, it's because he's a bully. But our parents just blew it off because it was probably one of the most popular kids, and his dad was the richest guy in the neighborhood, so nobody wanted to go against him. Like, it's just bizarre, right? Yeah, I pulled this from personal experience. So if you're wondering why it's very specific, because I use myself as an example, right? But we also grow up with siblings who tease us, ridicule us, and if we're not that person who's got the thick enough skin, and that's just not who we are as a person, that hurts. So that then becomes a micro trauma, small t trauma, right? So then how this shows up is when we have those, women are like, I'm so busy. I can do it myself. I'm so independent. I don't need any help. Like all of those things. And we want to get to a point where it's like you feel comfortable asking for help, because that's being vulnerable. And if you're being vulnerable and being open, that's going to help you move forward and release some of those traumas. So, like I talked about earlier, we go through numbing, we go through avoidance, total dissociation, which comes from the procrastination. So most people will understand when they're like, oh, it's just a small job, but I just can't seem to get it done. Okay? So that leads to our functional freeze, which is part of your fight or flight mode. So if you're so overwhelmed, your stress level is continually high because you constantly talk about how I'm so stressed. It's the story that you're telling yourself, which is giving you the out in order to not do anything, which is allowing you to procrastinate, which allows you to then just disassociate from everything that's going on. See how that circle went? Like, it's a lot. I know. I'm hoping this all goes through well because I know my Wi-Fi is doing its crazy thing again. So here are some of the things that, we want to avoid is wearing that busy badge that everybody has. And understanding it's like, oh, I can do everything alone. I don't have to ask for help. You know, and that mode, when you get into that, I don't need to ask for help, that means you're not even asking yourself for help. Right? And this is the part that most people miss. It's like, well, I'm not going to ask other people for help, which means you're not going to ask yourself for help either. You're not going to sit down and go, oh, yeah, maybe I should do whatever, XYZ. So here are some of the things that, we talk about how to move past the traumas and identify what addictions that are associated with them and the emotions that are associated with them. So, first and foremost, I talked about this is acknowledgement and acknowledging what your feelings are and giving yourself space. Okay, so a lot of people, they don't want to do that. Practicing proper self-care. And I say proper is like, it's great to go for a massage or a facial or go for a manicure, but that's really surface level. Proper self-care is asking for help, going to therapy, joining a group, getting outside, working on your personal development. And everybody's like, oh, I can do it myself. But the problem is you've never asked for help before, so you don't really know where you're supposed to be going, and it's very difficult in order to do that because you're always like, oh, I can just do it myself. But then what happens is you procrastinate that, and then you avoid it, so you don't actually do it yourself. So now we're back into that whole, disassociation circle. So I say this one a lot. Most people hate it, and if there's something that you really dislike doing, you have to ask yourself why and what you're avoiding in that. So that comes from, practicing mindfulness, which is being in the moment. So it's very, very different than meditation. So being mindful is like being mindful in everything that you're doing in the current moment. So if you're mindfully just enjoying the morning and you're having your breakfast, just be there, not trying to do 7 different things at one time. Just do one thing and do it well. The other, of course, and everybody hates this one, but, you can start changing that and tell yourself you love it, and it's journaling. Because if it's stuck inside and you don't get it out, it never goes away. It always just stays stuck inside. And then exercise. And this is another one, is like I talked about creating space, but you need to also create the space for the grief and the shame and the blame and all the actions. So it's okay to understand that, I didn't know what to do before, but now I do. So it's okay to have the space to grieve that. And if you're working on changing who you are and how you adapt, it's okay to grieve the person that you were, to be the person that you want to be, right? So if you're like working towards a lifestyle that's of change, you have to look back and go, okay, I'm no longer this person, but there's some grief in that, and people miss this step a lot. And this is a very key step of understanding that you're allowed to have the space to grieve. And also, the last one is to be compassionate for yourself, the people around you who don't understand the journey that you're going on, family members, because they're the ones that are going to try to pull you back every single time. And they usually don't like, your friends and family and coworkers like you who you were, and they're not going to really love who you're becoming because it probably doesn't serve them, right? Especially if you've got people and they're just, you're a people pleaser and people take advantage of that, and you're no longer. That's usually when the problems arise. So, guys, that's me for today. I'm going to leave it there for you. If you've got questions or comments, please post them below. If you're watching the replay, please hit #replay. And what do you feel is the biggest takeaway for you from my video today? Where do you feel that you're What addictive habits do you feel that you've got? Okay. Post in the comments below. And again, if you have any questions specifically for them, I will give them an answer. And the live should be up momentarily.